to Sisecam Flat Class India, and we are here for a talk show called Reflections. We have a very acclaimed designer with us called Ashmit Alag. He will tell us a little more about glass, and we will talk about his journey into design. Let's hear from him. So welcome, Ashmit. Let's know from you on what ignited your passion for design and how did you get into this industry?
The passion for design was primarily just the passion to live better. And when you design, you become at the forefront of it. So rather than being at the receiving end where you can't control a lot of things, the intent was to design, create new stuff, live better, not for just yourself, but probably give it out to society as well.
Great. So can you just step back a little and go to the times when, of your childhood and tell us, was there anything or a pivotal moment where you thought that interior design and architecture is for me or design is for me?
Yeah, so we had a room. I used to share a room with my younger brother when we were kids. And our father painted a kind of waves, multicolored waves on one of the walls. It was interesting to observe how that not just changed the proportion of the space, but sometimes would add depth, how the light would get reflected in the day or in the night or early in the morning, and the room kind of completely changed its feel.
Right.
And that was the psychological aspect of it.
Right.
Bringing the realization that we are, in a lot of ways, just an immediate reflection to the society around us. And shapes can completely shape us. How lighting affects us, how different things. And if you could control a behavior, why not? That was my entry point. It was a little quirk, but it was interesting to do.
Okay, so in terms of the wealth of experience that you've had before you started on with Transform, I would want to know what you've been doing as a designer and when did you step in to start your own studio?
So I came to India 20 years ago.
Right.
It's a very easy calculation. My daughter was born once we came back over here from the US.
Right.
I finished my schooling and then I went to America to study.
Right.
I went to Parsons as well as the Art Institute. And one thing after the other, I kept getting interested in more and more information and knowledge, and my programs kept on increasing. But then got married over there. Finally, there came a point that if we need to move back to India, the time is now. If we don't do it now, it'll become increasingly difficult to do it later. So I came to India, and then I started in India as a retail designer.
Okay.
So we would only design for retail.
Right.
They also believe in needlepoint precision.
Right.
I believe if you're likely to sit on two stools, you're likely to sit on the ground.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so we did retail. We did a good amount of retail. And then came an opportunity to do a house. And because we had done retail for the gentleman before, I said, we don't know how to do a house.
Right.
And he said, don't worry, I believe in you. If you go wrong, I'll do the damage control.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a step from a client side.
Yeah, such a big deal.
Right.
There are certain events you can never be grateful enough.
Right.
And when you talk about events like that, you actually look at the floor because you can't raise your eyes, and you shouldn't.
Right.
But so was it. And we did that project, and it was Wind Beneath the Wings. So I did one project, and then we did a series of projects. And then that's where we are right now.
Great, and we love to have you here and to be part of this industry. Let's know a little more about Transform, knowing how that stepped in. You said that you started on with a residential project eventually. What are the typology of projects that you undertake now, and if you can share a little more about your projects?
I think designers don't have a style.
Right.
Artists have a style.
I would have asked you, what's your signature style after this?
There is no signature style. In fact, an artist doesn't need to put a signature on the painting. You should be able to see it and you should be able to tell.
Right.
Okay. Design styles have sensitivity. You should be able to see and say, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, Gothic.
Yeah.
But that. Designers, in my opinion, are not supposed to have a style.
Right.
Because for every client, you're supposed to design something which favors them. Now, my understanding of India, and thankfully very early in my career, was that this is a society where people don't want to wear remotely similar clothes in a wedding.
That's true.
Now, something happening similar in a house is a very
Yeah.
big deal, and it's not okay at all.
Yeah.
I don't look up at it. So I feel if at all designers have to bring in something which is of consistency, it should be their technical know-how
Right.
and the ability to be able to create what the client wants in terms of a lifestyle.
Right.
But components, elements, silhouettes, nothing. We don't repeat anything as a
Right.
design. We repeat nothing. Zero.
Right. So design, like you likely said, now it's an ever-evolving process, right? You learn at every step. There is a new technology literally every day coming in. So how do you adapt to those things?
We're into the super luxury space.
Right.
Luxury doesn't change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So while we are talking about a lot of things going under a change, no. It sounds like it.
Right.
Okay. But let's say even if you, with technology, you can turn on the air conditioning from your phone.
Right.
But why will you do that at all? You expect the room or the
Yeah.
entire house to be of a particular temperature
Right.
throughout.
Right.
Yes, you can do it, but should you do it? I can drive, but should I drive? Do I want to drive?
Right.
The question is much larger.
Right.
Yeah. And when you're designing a space where somebody is going to spend their life in, or maybe let's say waking up events, sleeping events, and I'd also say, I mean, on an esoteric level, the people that we meet,
Yeah.
they don't live in places made by God. They don't live in jungles. They don't live in mountains. They live in buildings.
I think they're well urbanized enough and they're well traveled. They know literally
And-
everything.
And buildings are created
Yeah.
by architects and designers. So you understand the level of
Yeah.
responsibility that can be?
Yeah.
If you look at things from that domain, I think everything changes.
Right.
And I don't like to talk about beauty and aesthetics. I feel it's the easiest part of our profession.
Okay.
If I falter, the clients can incorporate a change over there and make
Right.
it better.
Right. Right.
So the point is, what
Make it
level
more
of
livable, I think, right? If that's the term.
yeah, in some ways, yes.
Okay.
But I believe in luxury like I believe in
Right,
God, you know.
right.
And the point is that the moment you need something, before you need it, it must be there.
Right.
And when you're done, you don't need it, it must evaporate. That's basic luxury. It's perfection to the level of having only what you need,
Right.
and that's it.
Great. I think that's a great thought, and I think not many designers live by that.
Right? It's a process
So-
of distilling.
Great to know. Let's move on to biophilic design. What, according to you, is biophilic, and how do you integrate nature in your designs, since you do so much of residential work?
Firstly, it's the new buzzword, it seems.
After sustainability.
After sustainability.
Yeah.
I mean, the word or the jargon might be very new,
Right.
but man lived in nature, open nature, biophilic before
Right.
we started making buildings.
Right.
So to answer, I mean, how important is it? I mean, it's very important, of course. We get all the source of energy from outside.
Right.
Even if you look at the old forts and castles and palaces, and I'm talking thousands of years
Right.
ago, literally, when we didn't have electricity, it had to be biophilic because we needed light from outside.
Right.
So it was then and it's now. Now you have better technology, you can control. You can see what you want to see when you want to see and not otherwise. I mean, you can use blackouts and you can use photochromatic glasses
Right.
to cut down on the light and sources.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
We like to consider nature from inside of the building or when you're doing interior designing
Right.
and consider picture window, which means you choose what you want to see at what angle do you want to see.
Right.
So you control the landscape dependent on how it's visible from inside.
Interesting. Okay. So, moving on, I mean, since we're talking about biophilic and we're talking about controlling nature from inside, I think glass is an important source for that, right? So, how have you incorporated interior glass in your design apart from this transition of bringing nature indoors, controlling it from inside? What more ways can we use interior glass?
Primarily partitions, surfaces, furniture, and all the typical purposes that one does. But we experiment quite a bit because we don't repeat any design.
Right.
So now we're experimenting with extra clear mirrors, which are acid washed versus frosted,
Okay.
versus lacquered and creating multiple textures. using 3 or 4 different layers of mirror.
Okay.
So it seems like it's an infinity of a place, but you never see yourself.
Right.
So the illusion of the spaces
Right.
is quite grand. It's very surreal
Right.
to say that. And we were experimenting on it.
I think that's quite futuristic. But do you also foresee any future trends in glass that you would like to have, which can lead your vision further?
Possibility, glass might be, transparent glass can probably become opaque
Okay.
with the use of some kind of technology, mostly electrical. You
Right.
can already make it frosted,
Right.
but when it frosts, it looks a little commercial.
Right.
But when you make it opaque, and that too, if you make it opaque and matte finish,
Right.
then it could become really plush.
Right.
I don't
And-
think we are very far from it. I don't
Okay.
think so. I think it'll be soon.
Great. I think we all hope for it.
Yeah, if
that-
nobody invents it, we'll invent it.
Nice. I think Sisecam would be quite happy to do it with you if that's needed.
Sure.
Okay, so we were talking about interior glass. Now I would want to know, in terms of functionality and aesthetics, which we were also talking earlier about, how important is aesthetics to you? Though you said that that's not always extremely important. So I would want to know that how does that go hand in hand when you're using certain future technologies, or you're using certain trends, or you're experimenting with something. How do you balance that?
Aesthetics is paramount.
Yeah.
I didn't say aesthetics is not important.
Right.
I said aesthetics is easy.
Right, right.
Okay. But not necessarily because it's easy, it's common sense. Writing with good handwriting is easy,
Right,
but is not.
right.
You got me? So how important is it? It's critical. Of course it needs to look good. Let's
Right.
take an example of food.
Yeah.
Of course it needs to look good.
Yeah,
Of course it needs to smell good.
right.
Of course it needs to be at the right temperature.
Right.
Of course the cutlery has to be perfect.
That's true.
Of course the setting has to be good. Of course the person who's bringing the food has to be perfectly in coordination with the food that you're going to eat.
Right.
And the lighting. So when you're talking about design, you're never talking about a thing in isolation.
Right,
It's the entire experience. And luxury is never about a commodity anyways.
right.
You know, we all have seen enough people in our lives that they might be wearing something supposedly a big brand and it looks fake on them.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because it's never about one thing. And
Yeah.
you know equally people who might be able to carry off just about anything beautifully
Right,
is
that's
the
true.
entire setting. You can never isolate, especially when you talk about luxury. You can never put it as a commodity.
Right. Are there any challenges that you faced when you're kind of blending in functionality with aesthetics, or when you're using glass in design?
Many challenges, but almost all of them can be overcome.
Right,
If you can't create a solution yourself, then you can ask, you can research.
right,
Most of the answers, when it comes to luxury specifically, are there in history, not in the present, and we're not seeking the future.
right.
They already exist, like
Right.
the example of Biophilic. You want to have morning teacup, you go to a greenhouse or you go to a conservatory. It's Biophilic, right there in the lawn,
Right.
like an island.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're just redoing stuff, calling it different things. If you can't convince them, confuse them.
Okay.
All right, that's what it is.
Okay. All right. So we were talking about projects that you've done and how you've incorporated Biophilic, how you do a concoction of interior, exterior, and spaces. Now I would want to know if you can just run us by an interesting project which you've recently done, which our audience will be viewing through this video as well. If you can just run us by that project, tell us a little more about how materials have been used there and how the use of glass has changed certain spaces there.
So we focus on the psychology of a space.
Right.
That's what we do at Transform. There are basically two things that are consistent in every project that we do. You can consider it to be our style.
Right.
It is that it's timeless, 100% of the times.
Okay.
It could be absolutely minimalist. It could be a Scandinavian minimalist, or it could be a Japanese minimalist.
Right.
And it can be layers and layers and layers if it needs to be. But always, the timeline is longer. Okay. Projects, Umar is bigger.
Right.
Okay? It's timeless.
Right.
Transcends through.
Right.
It doesn't force you to renovate after 5, 6, 7, 10 years. My belief, my understanding is that we might change our cars thrice in 10 years in this country. We usually don't change a sofa even once in 10 years.
That's true. I agree.
So we're not looking at trend.
Yeah.
It's not our problem. We don't need medication for it.
Right.
We're looking at timelessness.
Right.
And luxury is only about timelessness because you really invest time to get something really beautiful. You invent, you discover, you get it customized, you spend more money on it.
Right.
It better last you long.
Right. Right. That's
So
true.
it has to be timeless. Second, it has to be happy-centric places. If I take you to any of our projects,
Yeah.
there will be a feeling of either serenity or dynamism, fast-paced. It will shape you the way you are in a space. You enter into
Right.
that space, and I'll tell you what will happen to you. And because I'm going to tell you how or what will happen to you, in all likelihood, you will try that it doesn't happen to you.
Okay.
Yeah?
Right.
But I guarantee you it'll happen. Because it's pure psychology. If anybody applies any of those principles, like red is a bold, attractive color, right? You might like red, you might not like red. It doesn't make a difference. It is a bold, attractive color. So,
Right.
so there's a lot of psychology in
Right.
terms of, and that's the intent to push it forth.
Okay. All right. What about the specific project? Can you just tell us about the scale
Yeah.
of the project, how the applications happen, specifically this project? How did you start? Which was the concept that kind of built this project together?
So the point is, when you make a house, you almost make like an external, permanent, heavier clothing for the person.
Right.
You know, it has to reflect the person.
Right.
So the house has a lot of finesse. Okay, it's very monochromatic,
Right.
tone on tone, extremely warm and delicate to look like,
Right.
just as a client. Okay, but it has a level of chirp and oomph and glamour,
Just as the client.
just as
probably.
the client.
Okay.
And
Right.
hence the selection of material, the layouts, everything, how the lighting will be, how the lighting will function,
Right.
to the extent how the music should be.
Right.
And we usually do about 3 sets of curtains, which is for summer, winter, and monsoon,
Right.
so that things become nicer. So it's a lot
Right.
of visual merchandising.
Right.
For that.
Right.
And that's how every element is chosen. Not in its individual self, as I told you. It's never about one thing. You know, when we try sunglasses, there might be 1,000 sunglasses in the store. We try 10. 5 make us look not good. We buy the one in which we look good. We don't buy the one which is good.
Or which is trending.
Well,
Probably
sometimes people do that, but I think that's a little anti-luxury.
that. Right.
And that's why there are brands like Cartier, who's
Right.
not into as much trend.
Right.
So when you, in any case, when you go refine,
Yeah.
you go against trend.
That's true.
Okay, because trend is about what's in right now. Okay, that could be trend. But when
That
you're
might
talking
not
long
be
lasting,
timeless, right?
if you, the moment you say timeless,
Yeah.
you remove the element of time in it.
Right.
And that's how it becomes classic. One of the examples I can give you is in the classic domain. If I say Imperial Hotel, beautiful, timeless.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then there are enough contemporary examples, like if you go to Armani Hotel, very contemporary, very chic,
Yeah.
timeless.
Yeah.
So again, it's all the components put together, and they would shape it up.
Right. Any cherished project till now that you feel that this is my most cherished project? I'm sure that you don't want to have favorites when you're doing so much work and every design is unique to its own. But any favorites that you've had or any specific project that you would say that this is my most cherished projects?
First projects are always the most important projects
Right.
because you get made by them. You know, you do a little bit effort to make them, and then they make you.
Right.
So first projects are always.
Can you share a little more about that project?
The gentleman who took the risk and decided to do damage control. that was the project.
Right.
It's for a gentleman who has a very refined taste.
Okay.
They're into the business of watches.
Okay.
They're watchmakers.
Right.
So imagine somebody who's a watchmaker, what level of detail and finesse they would go into, right?
Absolutely.
So the house was to be done by them, for them. The house, interestingly, has more than 150 polishers.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think more than 145 were made by me on the site.
Wow. Okay.
That's also a time that I was not very congruent with all the vernacular in Hindi.
Right.
I believe अगर आपको झिरी काटनी बोलनी नहीं आती तो आप झिरी नहीं कटा सकते.
I think these are sight things that are really important for you to know.
Important. If you can't pronounce the thing rightly, then the labor doesn't understand
Right.
it.
Right.
Or maybe they think you just have a tourist point of view
Absolutely.
and you don't get across.
Right.
In the line of work, you might, like you said, BTS.
BTS, right.
Everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
Except for the person. Which means everybody else who understands it has gone through this in some way, shape, or form.
True, true.
So that's how it helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so close project that way. Multiple details again.
Right.
Kind of opened up, and also very rewarding because the family truly enjoys it. I mean, it's been about 12 years.
Right.
12, 13 years. I was there last week. Looks as beautiful.
I think that would be the most cherished part of designing any residential project, right? When you see people living in it and using it, and where you've put thought to spaces and they kind of utilizing that space.
Yeah. See, what also helps is, I mean, one of my backgrounds is visual merchandising.
Right.
Which is the impact of spaces on human beings immediately to create a reaction.
Right.
And almost all the spaces have this VM part in it, which is
Right.
to do with lighting and placement.
Right.
And you can make very minor alterations and you can change the space completely.
Right. Specifically, since you started with retail, and I think that's quite the most important part for a retail design, right?
I still do a lot of retail because that's where I get the data from.
Right. Right.
I'm talking about the psychological aspect.
Right.
That's what we collect the data from.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So anybody who's looking to do that should know this. Okay. All right. So let's just know a little more about anything that excites you now. Any specific typology of project that you would like to do and can be your dream project, so to call. So are you looking forth of any specific project like that?
We're working luckily on a project like that.
Okay.
I would say that we've been very lucky that every 3-4 months we come across a project which pushes us to do things which we have never done before.
Right.
My larger interest is to do things which not only that we haven't done before,
Right.
we haven't even seen before,
Okay.
so that they don't exist.
Right.
There's enough which has happened in the design world. Now the point is to push the experience. And if you see internationally how it's happened, it's not that materials, new materials, and it doesn't matter how many new materials are coming.
Yeah.
A lot of new materials are coming, but it doesn't make a difference really.
Right.
Is the style, the silhouette, how you make people feel in it.
Right.
That's what's changing. I mean, clothing is the best example.
Right. Anything can you share with us specifically about this dream project?
We're doing a project in which your ground floor living room goes or is raised and becomes a second floor living room.
Wow, I think that will be something to watch out.
Yeah, so suddenly it becomes open to sky. The glasses retract, the ceiling retracts. You lift it up.
Right.
Which means you're able to get a very different experience without going in and going up and all of that.
Wow.
And the amount of cost that we're going to incur on that is going to be lesser than recreating a living room upstairs.
Okay.
So it is so much better, convenient.
Efficient.
Very,
Right,
yeah.
absolutely. And very interesting
Yeah.
as a thought. Nice. So we look forward to that, and I think we'll keep following him to know that. Okay, so as we conclude this conversation, I would want to know that since you've worked over so many years, any significant changes that you felt that have happened in the way design industry functions or design functions? Have you evolved as a person, as a designer?
Have I evolved? Of course. I mean, I haven't
Okay.
just evolutionized, I've revolutionized myself.
Okay.
many times over.
Okay.
Yeah, my new revolution is my daughter studying in college. She's in college second year
Wow.
studying
And you started on when she was
architecture,
born.
interior designing. I wasn't even born, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going to my first China fair
Yeah.
after coming to India
Yeah.
and then going to Hong Kong from there, and I wanted to buy some kid things.
Right.
But I didn't know if it's going to be a boy or a girl.
Right.
So it comes from that point.
Right.
To the extent that I would like to do certain things that enables my daughter to come back and seed it up further.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the evolutionary thing that has happened.
Right. And in terms of design, anything that you significantly feel has changed about how design functions?
Yes. Earlier, the understanding of classical was extremely heavy,
Right.
and the understanding of modern was absolutely clean, crisp line, no details,
Right.
and both were inaccurate definitions.
Okay.
And
Right.
now it's easier to explain that classical does not mean heavy only.
Right.
And modern doesn't have to be sterile.
Right.
They both can have a lot of oomph.
Absolutely.
And that's happening big time. I think a huge amount of evolution happened for people during the COVID times. That's when people were able to see.
Right.
And then there are also, of course, projects which is an absolutely modern project, straight, and then you have a molding on top of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank God it's gone out. It should have gone out.
Okay. Okay.
So I think we're inching
Evolving.
towards truism, purism
Right.
of design.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
You're
And it was
welcome.
lovely chatting with you and knowing from you on what design really means and how we've evolved over the years. Thank you everybody for joining us on Sisecam Flat Glass India presents Reflections. And we will have interesting designers join us to share more about their design journey and glass. Thank you.